everybody. And today we're gonna, in the morning, focus on evaluation and assessment and things related to that. And Sonya Maria Johnson is gonna begin and tell us about testing features that are available in Moodle, and also talk about accommodating students' learning needs as part of that.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for that, Jim, and thanks for pulling us together so that we could do these sessions. I know that it's helped with my learning curve just, since Monday, so I appreciate that. I also really appreciate and want to give a shout out to the IT people who have been dexterous in meeting all of our needs, so thank you for everyone who's on that end, as well as our librarians. You all have just been a dream team. So this morning, I want to talk about Moodle and exams in Moodle very specifically. And then some of my comments are going to lean forward into where Joseph is going to take us by way of just thinking more, I think, imaginatively by way of assessment and what we can do at these particular times. So let me then share my screen. So Rachel was helpful to teach me how to do this yesterday, so let me get that going. And I apologize for my eyes looking in different directions, only in so much as, I'm dealing with different content. Okay, so hopefully you all can see my Moodle page. Oy Dios, okay. So I gotta move our boxes out of the way so I can see it. So I'm gonna talk you through how to do a Moodle exam. There's a lot of flexibility inside of it, and I like it because it does allow for this asynchronous, Joseph, it's go time. You have to tell me how to say that. I'm pre-coffee. My coffee maker died this morning.
Oh, asynchronous?
Asynchronous, thank you. Coffee pot died today, of all days. Well, no. So give me that grace. But thank you. So what it allows students to do is to take exams and quizzes in their own time. So I'm just going to talk you through. This is an old Moodle page, but I didn't want to scare any of my students by having a live, saying that they had an exam go live. But let me tell you a couple different features with this. So you want to, in creating an exam or a quiz, and I flip back and forth between that language, I'll tell you why in just a moment, but you want to make sure that your turn editing is on. Right now, mine is on. See how it goes green if it's off, and you can't really do anything. You can't move things around. Turn it on. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit, but just to get to the page I want us to be on. But notice how just wherever your Moodle page setup is, it's going to have these heading sections. You might even want to make a section that says exams and quizzes, so students know exactly what you want them to train on or to focus on. So when your Moodle page is live, you actually have the option to hide or expose or make visible the exam. While you're constructing it, I highly recommend you hide it. That way there's no confusion, and you can take all the time you need in order to basically get that content up and ready before you go live. So I'm going to start a new quiz or exam by going to that, let me just note that, add an activity or resource. And then you go down to quiz. In Moodle language, which comes from the UK, they call these kind of assessments, any kind of testing assessment, a quiz. However, you have the option of calling it either a quiz or an exam, depending on what your needs are. And you'll see here over to the side, it gives you some just bullet points of what this will allow you to do. And you go ahead and select it. So you're going to add it. Now, here is where you begin to set up. So you do have to name it. This is where quiz, exam, you make the choice. but you do see that there, with this little asterisk, you do have to fill in this field. So I'm going to make this an exam 1. The description, this is where you can give cues to your students. So instructions by way of how they need to think about this, how they need to frame it. I usually make Moodle exams open book, open note, because, well, one, they're out there and we're here, wherever here is for us. But the other option, the other thing it allows them to do is to think through their resources more dynamically. It also, I find, helps lower the anxiety if they know that they can have their materials. I'll go in a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit more about making robust questions. So only if you know the content will you be able to do it. This is not kind of a quick read thing that people can get through. So you'll put your description here, whatever those directives are, and then go through the setting up. Now this display description on course page, it will do exactly that. So when they hit the landing page, the instructions will be right there. If you do not click this box, then it means that they have to go into the exam quiz button. They have to click on it in order to expose the directions. So timing. This is where I also like to kind of embed some universal learning principles as well as accommodations. So by that I mean that I will open the quiz usually 30 minutes before my assigned class time, okay? And you can, toggle this, the timing. One thing to know, Moodle is in military time. All right, so you want to make sure that you attend to that, so the 24-hour clock. Closing the quiz, what I do is I usually give time and a half. So my principle is if one member of the course needs time and a half, everyone gets that, and then everyone is able to just finish inside of what time frame makes sense for them. And so I'm going to close this time and a half, let's say it's this. All right. So then it's enabled. What that means is the quiz, when it closes, then that's it. There are user overrides. I'm going to go through that a little later. Now, I like to have this open attempts are submitted automatically because then it provides a fail-safe. If students do not hit submit right away, or they're running it right up to the last minute, then their work is still saved. Now, for grade, this is where you need your Moodle grade book already set up. But I happen to do my things, my grade book by way of just a tally of points. It's very basic. Uncategorized means that it's going to, after graded, it's going to fit right into that entire course total. Now, here is where you might want to give some thought by way of, do you want this to be unlimited? Times allowed, this is up to you. I usually give them 1 attempt. And then you'll notice that the highest grade, the grading method is grade out, but say that we had unlimited, it would give you these options. But for the content I teach, 1 is enough. Layout. Now, it's helpful to have each page, every question will populate a new page. So basically it just gives for a really nice undistracted view for the student, for every question to present on 1 page. Question behavior, shuffle between questions. So this is interesting because I remember some of the feedback that Haley shared with us by way of students were concerned of who's going to keep me from cheating. I thought that was a little fun. It's like, well, you keep yourself from cheating, but I digress. So what it does is if it shuffles within the questions, it automatically creates whatever exam quiz you create. It shuffles the questions, shuffles the answers, so no one quiz exam looks the same. Everyone has their own. So there can be no sharing. And I actually prompt that. That might be something that you want to put on the instructions, that everyone has a unique quiz to them. So it just flags that, so-and-so's A is not going to be your A, just to kind of stave off any of the cheating behaviors, if that's a concern for you. The other thing, then you go back to the review options. I recommend, and as I was taught to use Moodle, to uncheck all of these attempts. So what it does is it will not necessarily give students the feedback right away or the answer right away, or even why the quiz is still open. It will delay giving those students access to what they did right, what they did wrong, until after they're graded. Now, for your own pedagogy, this might be something that you want students to basically learn by doing, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to stay focused on grading exams at the end. So then I only leave this column checked. All the quizzes are closed. And only after that happens, then they'll receive feedback. That reminds me, I need to make a note of manual grading. All right, so then you come down here, appearance, that is as you want. If there's anything that you wanted to upload, you could put that. I don't use that feature myself. However, I do use this feature here, which is not to require passwords, but to go into show more. And I go all the way down, browser security. This is another option that you can use to secure the quiz exam so that there could be no Google, by example, Googling quick answers or doing any of that kind of cut and paste. What I do is I do the full screen, and it allows for just Moodle quiz to be on the full screen. So after all of those are done, you can explore these other options. I don't use them. Again, I will put my comments to the students' essays, primarily inside of the quiz or inside of the manual grading, and I'll take you to that after we set this up. So you save and display. All right, now it says nothing's been added yet, as we know. And I have to move the little bar. So if this were live, however, the students would see that there's no questions. If the course itself were live, they would see no questions have been added. But it does give them this timestamp of this is when it's going to be available to you, this is when it's going to close. Scrolling down, you're now over here on wherever this admin column presents for you on your Moodle page, and you want to edit quiz. This is where you begin to add questions. Now, something to consider, and I strongly, strongly recommend, as in you probably want to do it this way because it makes your life easier, is to compose your exam in a Word doc so that if your system fails for whatever reason while you're doing your setup, you have your document. And just because of toggling between the different spaces, I didn't want to necessarily put up a Word doc, but I'll tell you about how to set up a Word doc so that it's easier for you just to do a cut paste feature. But now that we're here in the exam, you see that there's no questions. This is where you can put your grades. So the maximum is going to be here, whatever that looks like for you. And then also just, there's two ways for you to shuffle the questions, shuffle the answers. It's on the default that we just set up, but I also, just with an abundance of caution, like to also put the shuffle feature on here. So then what you would do is in a Word doc, you would open a Word doc, title it, as you would. When you are entering the exam, and let me see if I can, no, my screen share is not going to allow me to do it. So if you'll just take my cues, my verbal cues. So you will open up a Word doc and you will have question 1. You'll have a title. I like to divide my exams into different sections. So sections by way of, these are my concepts. Another section would be author 1 or reading 1, reading 2. And by having those sections, you'll be able to do a really nice kind of cut and paste. Also, as you're setting up your Word document, you do not want to put answers like label them 1, 2, 3, or A, B, and C, because any of those features in Word or formatting features in Word will actually not translate nicely into Moodle. You're better just almost presenting a rich text format, kind of typing of your questions and the answers, and then you can cut and paste back and forth. So, and if anyone has any questions on that, I'm happy to, kind of go through a Word doc, but, I want to keep us moving. So also with the final, for the setup, if you're doing true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, anything that presents an option, I recommend that you make the first the first response always the correct response, because then you'll know it for yourself. Moodle will do all the shuffling. You don't have to figure out where inside of this exam you need to find what the true answer is. So that being said, that's the verbal setup for Word. Going back to now the Moodle page, I'm going to add a new question. You see that it also, actually, let me just show you that it gives you new question, question bank. Random question is just basically kind of like a wild card question you want to put in there. But if this is something, an assessment that you'll be using over time, creating let's say you have a pool of questions by way of, here are the concepts, here's reading 1, here's reading 2, you can just basically source those or recycle or upcycle those questions at a later date. But let's assume we're doing a brand new assessment. So you have a new question, multiple choice. You'll see, and for others, these things might be relevant to you. I usually stay up in this realm, essay, short answer, true, false, and those are really the ones I rely on. So adding that. Here is where, if you've set up your Word document in advance, it's a cut and paste. So the question has to have a name. You can keep track of what kind of, hold up. What kind of question you're asking, or from what category. So let's say this is concepts. And then the text is you're going to just, cut and paste or type into this box. Sometimes it will time out. That's why I like the Word doc first. The default mark, meaning what's the points that you're assigning to this. I usually avoid or don't include general feedback at this point because I save that for the manual grading. Shuffle between the choices. We've already indicated that. And then this is where, if you always have the first option or the first or the correct response be number 1, this is where drag and drop will be of a benefit to you, because you always know that the first one is the true answer or the right answer. So let's just say, okay. All right. To assign the grade for that, is basically the correct answer, you're going to put that at 100%. Choice 2 is, and then these are the distractors. You can fill these in, pop, and then, all right. Once you have populated as many choices, I recommend symmetry. So throughout the entire exam, so I usually use 4. Just keep that consistent because it will just help you add symmetry to the exam and keep it clear on your end. Then you can save changes. Now what this will do is take us back, and you'll see that we have page 1. It means that the first page is going to be this. You can, I have to make some more questions, but several things that you can do here. You can do a quick edit with regard to the maximum amount of points. Say, you know, you're trying to get all the points to add up to 50. And here, you know, this is where maybe you have 40 questions and that's all you want. Play then with the totals over here. The preview, I hit the little hourglass or the little what is that? Magnifying glass. And it just lets you preview it to make sure it lines up. Now, the reason that this is where my discussion or my description of in your Word document, you want very plain text. You don't want to use number or letter features. It's because it will throw these off. So you really want to go for that just rich text format looking for your document and the drag and drop back and forth. So that's how it's going to look. All right. Ideal. Okay. Close preview, and now we're back. You can continue to add. Now I'm going to add a different question, an essay question, just so you can see what the difference is with that. So you'll add the essay. Again, the question name. Sorry. It's trying to be helpful. It's not. Question name is concept, or actually I'll put integration question. So for the essay questions that I can pose that integrate concepts as well as different types of reading, this cues to me what those are. So then the text is here. And I'm going to just write something just to have it. All right. Now, this is where you can reassign the points. So essays, you know, especially if it's an integrative question, I'll make those a higher stake. And then coming down here, you can discern how long you want this to be. This is quite helpful because it means that you're not taking time in, well, it's helpful rather to have the essay question inside of Moodle because it means that everything is typed and you won't be using time to decipher students' handwriting. I found that when I went to quizzes rather than handwritten, that it cut at least 2 hours from my grading time. So just a little fun fact. So you can set how many sentences or how many lines that students are allowed. I will put that in the question prompt. So limit 10. And anything else that you feel is important here. So I will say, and this is question specific. So especially in an essay, I'll say this is the limit. Please define all concepts that you use and provide page numbers to support your answers. And so that allows, again, for this nice, dense integration, and also the open book, open note. If they know the text, they know exactly where they can go to. If they do not know the text, well, this, they can't answer it. And usually what I have gotten more often than not is a little, mea culpa inside of their response. So, all right, save changes. So that's another type of question. And then I'll talk you through the two others. So notice how page 1, this is indicating, that this is what the students are going to see, or eventually they'll see this question. If I wanted to reverse this and increase or Rather, if I wanted to make sure to ensure that there are pages in between each question, or each question rather presents on its own page, then that's what you saw me do here in making a page break. But this is rather fluid in that, you know, you can drag these around however you might wish to. All right, so then we'll add another question. True, false. Question name. I will say, you see how it keeps trying to be helpful, but it's not, and wanting to give me those automatic fill-ins. Pay attention to that as you are setting up your quiz, because sometimes it will want students to put in a security password, and that's not what we're doing, you know, here. But I've had that autofill come in and kind of wreak a little bit of havoc. So just as a an aside, to something to attend to. All right, so 3. All right. So here you can, I usually make true, false, lower stakes, so I'll make that a 0.5. And it simply gives you, you know, is this true or is this false? You can toggle and make that decision, and then save changes. So now this gets you going and seeing that this is how, you know, how this functions. A couple of things that I'd like to go into next in order to help make accommodations for students who still might have some different needs. And needs we're experiencing now, of course, is they're in a different time zone. Maybe they have elder care, maybe they have child care, or earning responsibilities. This is where you can go in and make an override for a particular user. So it goes into user overrides. You'll add an override. This is why I was telling you, you know, delete that out. Trying to be so helpful. This gives you a list of all your students. So you can simply go to a name. Now, that search feature, if I was looking for someone in particular, but this drop-down list. Now, this is also where those passwords, you know, they're tricky, just delete them. And then I can offer the student an override, setting their time limits, and then I can save. You see here, it will allow you to enter multiple overrides. So now you see that for this particular student, here is the override they've been offered, okay? You can also just simply delete it. It's rather thorough. It being Moodle is rather thorough, so yes, do we want to delete it? Yes. So just, you know, making sure that that's the action you want. Other things, so I believe that gets a nice basic overview of how to set up. Now, what I'd like to do, unless there's questions, I'd like to shift into one of an exam that I've given, just so you can see what a completed exam looks like and how it functions inside of the gradebook. So I'll give a moment just for people, but I also need to see if I can get my chat up. I might not be able to see it. So Joseph, if I could rely on you, if you see anyone in chat, if you could just.
Yeah, Alexis asks if a pop-up would be thwarted by another device, but I mean, yes, that goes with the territory. And Kate is asking, how do you include choice in exams? For example, choose one of 3 essays. Is that possible to do?
Okay. How I would do it. Okay, so the first question, if you could repeat that, I didn't quite catch it.
Alexis said if someone has obviously a phone, they can still Google an answer, but I mean, that's not something we can control, right?
Right. And this is where, you know, you would want to make your questions robust enough you know, on your end, so that Googling a question is really not going to help them. So I can show you some, you know, just some wordings in some of one of my older exams, just so you get kind of a sense of how to make it Google repellent. The other thing that helps with the Google option is to control for that is if you, the time limit. You know, if they have to Google every single thing, it actually penalizes them by way of running the clock out. And so there are ways for, you know, unfortunately, they can trip themselves up, you know, with that. But one of the principles I have just in composing my exams is that I'm not going to police, you know, the students' learning. And I do tell them that I'm not going to police your learning, but I do have put other kind of social barriers, you know, kind of norming that differently of, you know, I'm trusting you to do ... So, you know, that's kind of how I control for the cheating or the recycling of questions and answers. I always tweak them just a bit. So, and then moving to Kate's question, if you could repeat that, please.
Yeah, so Kate, the universe question was, how would you, if you wanted to say choose one of 3 essays, how would you do that?
Right. So how I would go about doing that is I would go into the quiz. And quite honestly, I would embed it inside of an essay question. So I would choose essay. I would add the essay. And it would be, and here in the text, I would prompt them to say, or to read that you will write one, you know, select one and write on one of the following essays, making sure that you indicate which essay question you will be addressing. All right, I would write that out here by way of directions, and then I would put A, plenty of space. Okay, so A, here we go, plenty of space. B, or even option. Ooh, yeah. Ooh. Thanks for not judging me. See, I would present it like this, and then, you know, in the directions, cue that. And then down here again, you have your essay or the mark for it or the grade for it. So I would make that worth 6 points. And then similar to what I did in the previous essay prompt, I would say you have a limit of 15 sentences, define all of your concepts and include page numbers. So that's how I would treat that. Anything else before we look into grading?
No other questions lined up that I see.
Great. All right. Thank you. So then what I'll do is I'm going to go back and show you something I've already prefabricated. That's not it. All right. I have to remember which one is the real one. All right. So I'm going to show it. All right. So this is my prompt to students for the exam. Now, all of them have taken it, but I'd like to just show you a few things. So this is how it looks, you know, an exam would look once everything is populated. You can see, you know, the different readings. I've, you know, given those headers. Did we do multiple choice? This is a multiple choice one, and I just want to show it to you by way of like a fill in the blank. So I've used it rather than creating like an essay fill in the blank, it's done this way. And this is also kind of an example of how you can stave off Googling answer. So this is referring to a particular text. He identifies that the social science, there are multiple blank, that in systems of ideas intended to explain something. So then this, you know, I know that the answer is theoretical. However, it's already mixed it up, you know, for students. And this is also how the wording, there's really nowhere to go. You've created a zone. If they don't know Olson and the overall, what is the purpose of this particular reading, then it gets, you know, they make their best guess on that particular thing. So
can I ask a quick question?
Please go ahead.
So just to make sure, when you have the pages set up here, it's going to go in that order even if you have it set on random.
Oh, actually, excellent question. Even though it's set up this way, it's always going to randomize. It's going to randomize the questions per user. It's going to randomize the answers per user. So even so that Joseph, you and I are taking this exam, your page 15 or question 15 is not going to be my
okay, so it's not just a multiple choice. Everything is a multiple choice. Okay.
Everything is a grab bag for everybody. But Moodle does it. You know, back in the day, if anyone was you know, attended a university, a large university, or maybe had a large section of a class, and they had exam A, B, and C, and you know, they went through great lengths to randomize the papers, Moodle does that for you. So you don't have to create multiple exams. And it also staves off the sharing. You know, if you share your answer for 15 with me, then I'm going to get that wrong.
Thanks.
All right. Yes. Okay. So the other thing that I just want to show before giving the floor over to Joseph is results. So at the end, whenever you designate for your exam to close, then it will populate, you know, it will close it for everyone. Then for the essay questions, I'm going to hit results. Wait a minute. All right.
Can I interrupt real quickly again?
Please go ahead.
So Kate is asking, can students go back to a previous page, or are they restricted to one question at a time without having to go back?
Yeah, excellent. So inside of the setup, let me just actually go there. Inside of the setup of the exam, or of the quiz, there was a free, when I selected, hold on, this is in the edit settings, when I selected free navigation, okay, layout, it's either in layout or appearances, but let's see. Okay, new page, question behavior, shuffle, oh, I gotta find it. The thing that I'm looking for is the navigation inside of it, and it's free navigation. And what that means is that they can go back, they can skip around inside of it. And I found that that allows them to, the students to kind of give time. If there's like, if they get one of their big bulky essay questions right away, then they might need to think about it a little bit. They can move on without missing that question. But inside of the exam setup, that's where you want to select the option for free navigation. And what I can do is, you know, in the interest of time, find exactly where that is when Joseph is talking, and report back on where to set that up. But I recommend free navigation, because then it allows them, kind of like what they would do with a paper exam or quiz, turning pages back and forth. Okay. So going into results, what this does is I will scroll down to manual grading, meaning that all of the different essay questions that students have typed out are going to be in one location. And this is the location. I know exactly what question it is, and it will give you kind of a running queue of that which you have to grade and that's which is already graded. So you'll see here it says to grade, they're all done, but already graded, all of these are here. But notice you can also update the grade. Say, you know, your eye skipped it, a student wants to contest it. I've had very little contestation, you know, of questions and answers, but, you know, it happens, we're human. So we can go back to it. Now, what it is I can say grade all of them. Let's say that I had, you know, to grade all of them. I like to grade as many as possible at once. And so you can even set up your grade layout so that for here, I would want to see 10 pages or 10 questions. I always go by the student's first name or last name, only in so much as Moodle will continue to kind of roll through the roster of who you have to grade. So you see that this is the student's, this is the question, this is the student's response. And notice I've given a limit. Down here, I can then type in any kind of comment, any kind of feedback to whatever it is. You know, if they didn't get the full questions, you don't need to type in comment, but usually if I'm marking something down, I'm going to give them the reason why. That way, when they're in their grade feature, they can hover over their comments and see it. And then it just goes, you know, okay, well stated. I also like, you know, little pats on the back. Okay. And then I grade all of those. Yes. It's just prompting me, you know, to go forward. And it's as simple as that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the list of questions because all of these are graded. Now, when all of the essay questions are manually graded, everything else is automatically graded and placed inside of or dropped into your Moodle gradebook. So if I go back to the page and I'm going to go over here to my gradebook, I just want to show you how it presents and then take questions and then give the floor to Joseph. So it populates automatically inside. I'm going here, prep work. All right, here's the exam. So this drops the numbers in real time, you know, for the students. So they're seeing the grade, they're seeing their numbers, and it will also allow for, you know, some preview. Anytime you have that little hourglass. Now I see this is where they've missed. And you can give targeted feedback, you know, if a student wants targeted feedback as to what they missed, or they got a point deducted. And then it gives you some different things for here. But those were the things that I wanted to flag for you in terms of, you know, doing the Moodle exam. I'm happy to, you know, take questions after as well, you know, and troubleshoot question writing. But I just am checking my little list to make sure I told you the things that I wanted to flag for you. And I think that might be it for just now.
Thank you, Sonya. But before we move to Joseph, I wonder if anyone has other things they would like to share in this vein at all. So one of the things that I've learned from Amy Briggs, what she has done and what I've started to do is to do Moodle quizzes, short Moodle quizzes that are more formative than summative. that are maybe 10 multiple choice questions where students can answer or take the quiz up to 10 times. And they get a number correct out of the 10, but not individual answers until they're done with their 10th quiz, which is a great way to make students engage with material and think about what they know and what they don't know and how sure of they about what they think they know. And I think it's been a really productive thing for my class.
Yeah.
But if other people have things to share, this would be great.
This is Rachel. I do something very similar to that, Jim. I use the Moodle quizzes in my emerging diseases class, like flashcards for vocabulary. And so I load up like, 100 vocab terms per week, and then just allow them to take the quiz I leave it unlimited, and I show them the results right away. And that has actually been very helpful too, and useful. So I do a similar thing in my neuroscience class with multiple choice questions just from the textbook as a reading check, and I get really good feedback from students that that's helpful for them to shape what they're supposed to focus on in the reading.
That's great.
We'll do a lot on the chat.
Other questions for Sonya? If not, we can come back at the end and open things up. So Joseph is up next.
Hi, so I was asked, oh wait, no, that's just a comment. Okay, so I was asked to talk about assessment, and sort of, obviously this is building on what Sonya was showing us in terms of thinking about transitioning to online, thinking about transitioning materials from the classroom to the online space. So if anyone has any questions or anything they're struggling with beforehand, so thank you so much to Sonya and everyone else who has showed us so much about how Moodle works. I've learned more about Moodle in the last 3 days than I have in the 2 years that I've been here. So I've been using Google Classroom sort of as an experiment this semester. But a lot of what I've been focusing on is trying to think about what it actually is that we're looking to get out of assessment, and to think critically about how we're doing that. And so one of the things that I've seen, and I think is the most difficult, is having an assessment, particularly if it's something that you do in class, and trying to think of how do I translate that onto Moodle, onto Google Classroom, onto some other digital format. And so one thing I mostly want to encourage people to think, what am I trying to get out of this assessment? Sort of what are the main goals? And can that be done in the same format? And I know that a lot of people, myself included, have a lot of site-specific, a lot of interactive, a lot of collaborative assessments. And this might be a time when we have to drop some of those. I mean, for example, I was supposed to have 4 sessions in the Wright Museum for my intermediate French class, and then 4 sessions in the Learning Lab working on digital production where students would produce films about Beloit. And so obviously, as students won't have the technology, that's not something that can be reproduced on cell phones, something that can be reproduced in another digital format, given the limitations that I know students have. And so in many ways, being able to move on to whether it be Moodle, a platform that comes with your textbook, or Google Classrooms, coming up with digital exams is a way to assess some of the things that I was trying to assess more creatively. In what is, unfortunately, slightly more conservative to move back to exams, but I think that now is a time when we have to be as clear as possible, rather than allowing students to sort of experiment and think about ways that they can show what they've learned, the skill sets that they've built in different ways. And so, for example, whereas I wasn't planning on having traditional exams in one of my classes for the second half of the semester. Obviously, I'm moving back to more traditional exams and putting everything online because of the fact that there's certain constraints that just make that impossible. And so one thing I was wondering is if it would be helpful for people to kind of throw out ideas of what they're struggling with in terms of transferring from a sort of collaborative or experiential learning type model into something that's more accessible, and thought that perhaps we could use this as a forum to try to think about that. And one of those is like Jim was saying, in terms of using quizzes as something that's formative. Quizzes are something that I've used for a long time as something where students can take as many times as they'd like to be able to build up. And likewise with online homework, the idea is for students to use those as learning tools, which particularly in terms of asynchronous activities, allow them to do that in ways that don't have to be synchronous. Does that make sense? So yeah, like I said, I wasn't going to present on Classroom because I've seen, I think that the library did a really great job, and I thank the librarian so much for presenting on that. And I don't know if this would be a useful time to sort of think collaboratively, for people to share ideas, to think about things that they're struggling with, and how we can sort of rethink what we're actually trying to assess, rather than thinking about how we can take, exam number 7 and make that something that will work online.
Floor is open. So one of the things that I've been wondering about is related to the fact that I know that one of my classes has a very active group chat that's just the people in the course. And so they talk about homework and other things the whole time. So I wonder how online exams sort of mesh in a world where everyone could potentially be communicating at the same time. And so I've been trying, so far not terribly successfully, with ways in which exams could in some way be collaborative. I don't know if anybody has ideas about that at all.
I mean, that has been one of the struggles. So I sent out surveys to all of my students asking to find out when they would be available. And I know that I've had pretty good luck in terms of students letting me know whether they'd be available at certain times. But from other people I've talked to, I've been the exception in terms of trying to get students to let professors know when they're available, and particularly when they're available to collaborate in terms of synchronous time. And part of the thing is there's all sorts of collaborative projects that they could be doing, but that would involve some sort of face-to-face recording. And I still don't know exactly what my students will have in terms of wireless connections, the speed of that, which has thrown a wrench in sort of thinking about what students can do synchronously outside of the classroom. And I think that's one of the places where being nimble and realizing that week to week, we're probably going to have to change some of what we're doing, because this is the first time that any of us have had to throw something online in a crisis, unless there's something else that I've missed.
So I had an idea to share to your query, Jim, and if they're collaborating anyway, it makes me think that, well, lean into their collaboration. So maybe there's like a class exam, like, so it's basically a collaborative exam that everyone is taking, and they have to suss through the questions and answers, and you're grading, they have to like arrive on, I don't know how big your class is, but it's like basically generating, from that, they're going to be talking anyway.
Yeah.
So making it a little competition, you know, maybe you even divide it into several little groups and they have a collective exam, and, you know, how maybe in real time, I don't know, you know, I haven't thought through all the particulars of it, but then it becomes a collaborative exam and everyone is getting this, is basically going to get the same or the same grade. So then it's a way of, you know, them banding together in like a generative way. I've had group quizzes in classes, whereas where the day is a quiz. And so everyone's input is kind of a popcorn way of like keeping the momentum going. And they get really excited because it's kind of, it's competition, but it's like a group enhancing competition.
And that's where something like Forum on Moodle or the question function on Google Classroom would allow you to also trace what students have been discussing if they want to do that in a sort of written platform where you get to see how we've been building about that.
Yeah, so I've considered that, and what has made me hesitant is that this particular class is one where there's a wide range of abilities among the students, and I worry about there being some hard feelings about the contributions of different people, or whether there will be people left behind in terms of a learning experience, not really being able to keep up with others in the class who are likely to just tear through the thing on their own and be done. So I'd be interested to get thoughts about those kinds of issues too. So Susan says that she is trying to figure out how to deal with the need to assess students' ability to handwrite kanji characters and how to build those into tests and quizzes.
Yeah, Sonya, is there any sort of drawing function in any of the Moodle exam questions that you know of?
I don't, but, you know, it makes me want to go in and explore, you know, something like one of the other functions. You know, as I mentioned, I stay in the kind of the top range of the type of questions, just based on the content I use. But, you know, it makes me think that perhaps there's like there's a Snapchat something that could potentially be in there, or you know, for Susan, I'm just brainstorming. Maybe they're taking a picture, like a selfie with, you know, their kanji, and they're sending it to you. You know, I something that I thought about doing was, you know, drawing on my coffee mug collection, you know, and having that as like as part of the little, you know, I'm thinking about doing some taping of content, and, you know, having like a little coffee mug, you know, just to kind of personalize something. Mm-hmm. And so it makes me think that, you know, something that you might be able to do is encourage them to personalize their exam or their quiz, you know, turning in. So maybe they're practicing their kanji and maybe finding an object that relates to that kanji. Just thinking about it. But I also see where people are writing and I just can't write, or I can't talk and read at the same time. So I'm just going to pause to read.
Hey all, this is Adam. There is a whiteboard function built into Moodle. It doesn't work great, so I guess I wouldn't recommend that for kanji. The easiest way to handle this is probably going to be to just have them write it down on a piece of paper and then use a camera app or something like that to take a picture of it and upload it.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't see anything else in the Moodle exam. I was just looking through that.
And then Kate says for Moodle, they can upload attachments. Could they upload pictures? Yeah. For quizzes or to an assignment. Okay.
The one caution on that, it's a great way to do it. You'll just want to make sure that when you're in the upload settings, when you're setting up the exam or the assignment, that you increase the maximum number of uploads that they can do, because they're probably going to have to take multiple images to try to get them to be legible. So I would bump it up to like 10 or 15 or something like that, just so that they can get everything, get good images of everything, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And Susan is saying thank you. The exciting, and I think, you know, your point of, and that's something that all of us, I think, are really struggling with right now. So we want to make we want to make it interesting and funny and dynamic, or fun and dynamic, because that's what we do, you know, here, especially with our instruction. So, I mean, going back to what Joseph was saying, is where are some of the ways that we can go for make sure that the assignment is clear, and make sure that like that base level of comprehension is present, and then, you know, add on to that. So that's where I would think, you know, if they wanted to selfie some little item related to, you know, the topic, would be a way of engaging them inside of their new spaces.
And this is also a time that might be interesting to ask, particularly if you have teenagers, to ask if there are online forums or apps that allow them to send drawings to each other. Because I know that there's certainly that technology out there. I don't use gaming technology to communicate with people, but I know that there's all sorts of stuff out there. And there's got to be a way to have some sort of ongoing chat where you can add drawings rather than just text. And I wish I had a better suggestion for that, but I've seen stuff. I know that there's stuff out there.
And something that I wanted to go back to, Jim, with your question, and, you know, dealing with the range of learners and their ability in your class. Something I'm thinking about that I heard from a colleague at another, you know, location, that they were doing kind of fireside chats. I don't know if this will work with your content, but if you can prefabricate groups and have like a, you know, maybe a conversation, even a phone call, you know, conversation, but you're like hosting, you know, a chat with them, a fireside chat over the content.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I thought about that too. It's also kind of a way to think about breakout rooms.
Sure.
You know, but
and they have a chat going already is something. I mean, I've tried to convince classes to start group chats, and I've failed for the most part. Particularly, I mean, when I'm teaching language, I would love for my students to be texting back and forth and building on what they're doing. So was that something that just developed organically among your students, or was that something that you initiated?
Organically, and I think it starts often during field trips. We do lots of field trips, and we might be in 2 different vans, and people want to talk to each other in the different vans. And so it doesn't start terribly academically oriented, but it turns into that. So I think it's really productive when it happens.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, you can use the momentum of something that they already have experienced and, you know, kind of carry that into their space, because it makes me think, you know, one of the things that we have to offer for our students at this particular time is a sense of consistency.
Yeah.
Not necessarily by way of, you know, all of the content and doing it the way we would want to deliver it, but the consistency of we're familiar faces. We can be an anchoring point, and maybe building out, like Joseph had recommended, building out from these are the points of content, of contact. How do we allow that to kind of help frame their current situation?
Yeah.
You know?
Are there any other specific issues people are having that like might be useful to discuss with the group?
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, am I doing this right?
You are.
Perfect. Yay. I just guess I want to put out there, I have spent the whole week talking to lots of students that are very anxious with their accommodations. I'm going to send out an email kind of to everyone, but I thought this was a good group to maybe talk a little bit about the fact that I think that the stuff that Dr. Johnson put out there about testing is fabulous, especially the time things have been a big concern. I think one of the largest concerns I'm hearing right now is from some of the students that have mental health disabilities and the anxiety of doing those chats. And even for me today, like this is the first time I've talked on Zoom. Am I doing it right? I can only imagine what that feels like to our students. And I think that just that everyone being aware of that and really just giving people that flexibility of doing it wrong the first time and letting them know it's okay, and just being there for them, because I think that's the number one thing that the students that are using my office are really, really anxious about, is just figuring out the technology and making sure that this doesn't affect their grades right now. I think that the accommodations they want or need, we know that we're not going to know those for weeks to come as the classes are coming out. It's the anxiety of doing the technology correct. So I'm really encouraging them to send those emails and have those conversations with their faculty if they are having trouble getting on or having trouble with the chats, and I'll keep that open for you guys too. But I think that's a really good point with the chats, is just making sure that everyone, if you feel like you're not hearing from someone, it might not be because they're not engaged. It might be because they don't know how to engage correctly. And if you think there's something I can help with that capacity, obviously please reach out. But I think it's a big anxiety right now for students of like mastering the technology.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the things that a lot of people, myself included, have found is that there are times when you have things like Moodle forums in courses that you hear a lot from people who in class might not be contributing that much at all. And so having lots of ways for people to get involved, I think is really important.
And likewise, I mean, in the same way that doing group discussions can lead to students feeling more able to talk to a larger group, I think the breakout rooms is super important, because I mean, there are so many students that I've had who will not talk to an entire class, but if they're in a group of 3 people, or if they're doing an online forum, they have all sorts of brilliant things to say. The other thing that I think is important in terms of what we're doing is to jump in and to not. So from people who are still.
You faded out for a second there. Say again, please.
So one thing that I've heard from some people who are teaching currently this week at other institutions is starting off the first Zoom conversation with just students sharing memes about professors teaching via Zoom. Sort of ways to sort of break the ice, ways to sort of laugh at what we're doing beforehand, so that it doesn't start off as this very intense, and also to not start off as jumping in and assuming we're going to start teaching that first day back. Maybe we'll be playing around with Zoom and trying to figure out how it works, and acknowledge that we're learning just as much as they are, that we're not coming into this with years worth of experience.
Right. I think that's, the framing it, that, we're learning this together is an important thing. When I reached out to my students, I actually drew on the integrative learning goals and saying, oh, it's go time. We've been doing this. We've been practicing effective communication. This is just another way to get that done. And so again, drawing on some of the familiar in order to move, even hesitantly, into the unfamiliar. And I think that that's really important. And to emphasize Angie's point is, the anxiety is real. And I think, to go ahead and norm that, for them as well, and to suggest that let's give ourselves permission to do this very badly until we do, we gain the facility to do it, much like what our classrooms are about, in gaining facility and content and, and skills. So something that, the breakout session, there was something with that. Maybe taking the liberty of doing a little social engineering. I've not explored this by way of Zoom just yet, but I know that I was looking in Moodle in groups and doing some social engineering by way of partnering students who are stronger in some areas with students who are not, and so it kind of and then a student who's kind of serves as a bridger, so like at least these really tiny groups, to maybe draw those abilities in. But I also had a question for you, Joseph, but I'm curious to have others chime in on this. I wanted to workshop an assignment that I wanted to do, but I want to be mindful that people are also in the chat, and I can't do the both, so I need to just read for a second.
I don't think we have anything new.
Nothing new? Okay, great. So I have papers, research papers in several of my classes. And I think that for one of them, I want to do maybe an autoethnography, more shifting some of what they would study. And I'm thinking about maybe even reaching out to the librarians to do a virtual teach of, how to look at resources now. But for these papers, they needed, I wanted students to look at, find sources, book sources, as well as what are those, journals, journal sources. And I'm wondering though, if I could have some help in peeling back what is the intention, I'm trying to do. Like, and really kind of boil it down, because, I like the assignment, but I need just some thought about how to reimagine what I'm trying to target, how I'm trying to target, what I'm doing. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Between the autoethnography and the sources, out of curiosity, how do you see those as interconnected?
So for one of the classes, it's healing and religion. And so what are their personal stories of healing? And maybe using that as a way to kind of back into a research or a research situation. I was going to have them read, or what was I going to have them do? Healing traditions that they might have wanted to explore. But I'm thinking that the autoethnography gives a different kind of emphasis and space for them to talk and integrate their lives with the current content we've already dealt with.
And so I found activities that are more personal, but then can involve a sort of research or reflexive aspect. So one thing that I've done in a lot of classes that I think works really well, I've done them as some midterm projects because it builds towards a final, but as a final project, to have a somewhat creative assignment, whether it be students imitating a type of autoethnography, imitating a type of autobiography, a type of literature. So for example, one of my classes, I'm transitioning our final activity. The writing assignment is going to be thinking about epistolary novels. And they're actually going to write a fictitious novel, a fictitious letter that would be part of a larger novel, reflecting on their first week at Beloit. So part of it is also engaging with the literature that we're doing, writing a short sort of reflexive piece that shows that they're engaging with it critically, but also trying to, in the absence of a physical campus at the moment for most of our students, to try to think about ways in which we can also make these community building experiences. And so it's something like the autoethnography. In an ideal world, they would have, and they do still have access to lots of digital resources, but there might be certain limitations in terms of the speed of their internet, when they can access the internet, that moving parts of that into a sort of creative realm and then thinking critically about how they do that is a way also for them to sort of engage personally as it's, 7 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, they're going to be even farther from campus than they were, at the beginning of this week. And sort of be attentive to that. I'm trying to work through and think of ways in which we can bring campus back into online platforms and into the ways that we assess and think about how our classes are progressing in the absence of, of Java Joint, of the Powerhouse, of the dorms. And I found that, so creative assignments may seem a little bit fluffy, but in particular my upper level literature courses, when I've asked students to really engage with and imitate, and this could be used across the board, whether it be in thinking about a study, thinking about, like you're doing ethnographies, thinking about different ways of exploring, to bring that into a fictitious realm allows them to then break apart and think about the source they're working from And then if they reflect upon it, they're like, well, this is why I would do my study this way, or this is why I would conduct my ethnography in this manner, is because I was looking at X, Y, or Z. So I think also some creative activities can help bring in some different perspectives and some different ways about thinking about how we assess what they've accomplished. And for the record, Haley writes that she's more than happy to help you get students involved in what the library has to offer, particularly at a distance.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for that. I like, the staging of that too. It makes me think that I can take those larger, I do the scaffolding anyway of larger projects, but how to bring in, like kind of trail them out a little bit and bring in more creative aspects around it to engage the students' environment. And, it makes me even think about, like that critical aspect of bringing Beloit to the students. And so what are the ways we can do that? Like, at the risk of being, silly with my students, I would actually go over to the Powerhouse and maybe record my little blurb in front of, my lecture blurb in front of the Powerhouse.
Right, and it's something that is a concern in terms of surveys that I've sent out to students.
Yeah.
When I ask how they're doing, they're like, my freshman year is kind of blown and I'm upset, but I'm doing okay. And so, whether it was your expectation of and it doesn't really matter about your year. Seniors are upset because they're missing the end of their senior year. Freshmen are upset because there was a certain idea of, coming back after spring break, they had kind of figured things out.
Yeah.
Things were moving forward. It wasn't going to be this uphill battle. It was going to be more about they were in it. And so I do think, as cheesy or fluffy as it may sound, I think maintaining the fact that we're still Beloit, despite the fact that we're scattered around the globe right now, is important.
I think that's right. And I think it's going to be really important for us to find ways of building community that go beyond individual classes. So I think everyone is thinking about how they build community within their course, but students need to be having ways in which they feel like Beloit College students, not just as a student who's in these 3 disconnected courses that don't really feel a part of something bigger.
Right. And as you know, so Catherine and Donna are currently posting about the ideas of a faculty lunch or faculty happy hour. I also want to point out, and this is something that if Donna wants to build on, Donna's been sending out emails to those of us involved in Symposium and looking at working on getting students Symposium projects on YouTube. And that would be something where, why not build that into a class? Like, why not ask students to watch a couple Symposia presentations and to sort of give some feedback or to think about, because Symposium is also an important time to remember what sort of amazing stuff for us, our students, but I think more importantly, not what our students are doing, but what our students' peers are doing, to sort of, for students to say, oh, wow, yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm stuck in my parents' house in central Illinois, but like, look what so-and-so has been doing in the last year. And so whether we build in, some sort of happy hour or lunch or some sort of communal meeting time, it could be really cool for students to, and this you could set up on Zoom, I could project the YouTube video, and then our students could be giving comments on the side and asking questions. And that could be something that doesn't have to be synchronous, particularly since most of these are going to be recorded. But, I could say, hey, is such and such student interested in, Zooming into my class or Zooming in with this club, which is another thing. I mean, clubs are losing time together as well. So I think there's all sorts of ways to do that. And so we've got, so Kate Lindenberg says that Britt told me yesterday that she's setting up Dungeons and Dragons drop-in for physics majors, which is awesome. Susan created a Facebook group for students that they've been sharing stuff on. So I think more and more, and like, you know, Susan's got lots of cat pictures, but I mean, I think I've heard really good success of students sharing, like I said earlier, those memes of like, there was a really good one. It said something like, my professor doesn't know how to turn off the auto continue play on YouTube, and this person's going to run an online classroom. And so it was a way for students to engage with and kind of laugh at the fact that we're all learning through these technologies. Mm-hmm. And I think in sort of laughing at those things, it also, we're not taking ourselves too seriously because, mm-hmm. Like you said, like we've all said, we're all going to screw up at some point along here trying to figure out Zoom classrooms or Hangouts or whatever we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Donna.
Since Joseph raised the question of the symposium, I do want to encourage everyone to do what they normally would have done. So I know a lot of people, for example, require students to go to particular ones, let's say, that are related to their discipline, or just in general to go to X number and write responses. There's no reason why we shouldn't continue to do that. And then another thing I wanted to say is that a few students and faculty have raised questions about, let's say, if a particular type of presentation or the type of research isn't appropriate for, access by the outside world, let's say, if it's of a sensitive nature, for example, and we're exploring different ways of dealing with that. So I guess what I'm saying is that people should not necessarily be put off by the idea that this is, that everything's getting posted to the college YouTube page. I mean, we can find other ways for students to participate, disseminate their information, whether it's simply locally or, whether they're comfortable with it going all the way out there. And again, questions have come up about posters. So, feel free to ask me if you've got questions about alternate venues or modes of conveying what students are doing. So we really want those who've done a lot of research, spend a lot of time, especially if this is the culmination of their CAP, let's say, senior theses. We're open to finding whatever ways we can to allow them to share that. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Donna.
Thanks.
I did want to go to this point that Catherine and Donna both raise of, like doing a Zoom lunch together or a Zoom happy hour, if Zoom or Google. I think that's important too, just for our own sense of, sanity, but also feeling connected. I think the things that we take for granted is our ability to see each other, and just passing through campus. So I think that I would be open to, a Zoom lunch together, I guess is, what I'm putting out. But, as much as we're trying to be intentional about creating community connection for our students, the synergy that happens that we take for granted, just in being in shared spaces is a definite thing that I think we just have to be mindful of for ourselves as well. And Joseph, I'm glad you raised the thing with regard to clubs and attendance, and some of the club activities. It makes me, as being an advisor of a club, what I might be able to offer by way of, some of that programming. Mm-hmm. I have to think a little bit about, what that is, but certainly yoga. Actually, one of my classes was going to be about yoga for the healing class, mm-hmm. and about the science of yoga. And so I was going to actually take them through not just sequences at home, but breathing in particular. But that was going to be part of my class content. I could see, traveling that out a little bit and doing, some other stuff related to, breathing.
I think in a related sort of idea, I think that as departments have meetings, if they don't do so already, inviting a student to sort of be a representative of the rest of the majors in those kinds of things is going to be really productive, both in terms of listening to students and what their concerns are, but sort of making people feel tied to Beloit and a part of the bigger community.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, concerns, thoughts, anxieties?
Thoughts about evaluation and exams. We sort of drifted from that, but
You did.
it's been productive, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and thank you. I think it was Alexa had circled back to say where to find the free navigation. And the free navigation, yes, is in the layout section. So of the Moodle quiz settings. So thank you for including that. I just wanted to flag that because I was supposed to circle back. And oh, there's someone new. Oh, okay.
I
think Donna's called it.
I didn't mean that.
I was going, wait a second. I gotta go get a new coffee maker.
Any other things people would like to share? If not, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Sonia, Joseph, and Angie, very much.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this.
A lot
Yes,
this
thank
morning.
you. Take care, everyone.